I'm Dr. Luke Wilson, and today I'm going to talk about my 21st century food course. Before we dive in, though, I'll do a bit quick introduction to myself as well, since it's probably the first time that I'm meeting most of you. So basically, I've been interested in food as long as I can remember, and I actually decided to become vegetarian when I was just 4 years old. So I had a pet lamb at the time, and when I found out what was going to happen to her when she went back to the farm, I made the decision that I didn't want her or any other animals ending up on my plate. So, as you can probably imagine, from a young age, I found myself answering a whole bunch of questions about food, health, and nutrition, and that's something that stayed with me as I grew up. Now, when it came time to choose a career, I decided that I wanted to do something that was going to help people. So, I initially trained in psychology and completed a master's degree, and my intention was to become a clinical psychologist. But after a year of training, I decided to change tack and I went to medical school. Now, during med school, I came down with what we think was swine flu. I was stuck at home in a vegetarian flat, and I was reading about President Obama's healthcare reforms, and I saw a comment recommending the China study. So I looked it up, I downloaded a copy, and I read the whole thing in a day. It was really eye-opening because it didn't even just confirm that I was on the right track, but it suggested that I could go even further. At the time, I was still eating some dairy, eggs, and fish, mostly because by that point I'd gotten into strength training, and I thought that animal protein was essential if I wanted to look like the guys on the cover of Men's Health. But as you probably know, the China study suggested the exact opposite. So I started diving really deep into the references and reading books by Dr. McDougall, Esselstyn, and Ornish. Soon after, I actually had the chance to hear Dr. Esselstyn speak in New Zealand, and I even got to talk to him and his wife, Anne. And at the event that I was at, we were among the first to watch Forks Over Knives. And I knew then that this was what I wanted to dedicate my career to. So in the fifth year of medical school, we get to do something really neat in New Zealand. We get to choose a place in the world where we want to study medicine for 3 months. So, of course, I reached out to Dr. McDougall and he welcomed me to his 10-day program. Obviously, though, 10 days, 3 months, a bit of extra time to fill there. So I managed to find out that just down the road from where Dr. McDougall was running his 10-day program was an amazing health centre called the True North Health Centre. So I got in touch with Dr. Goldhammer and he kindly arranged for Dr. Michael Clapper to supervise my elective. So this was just an incredible formative experience. And in fact, one of my other friends from medical school went over and did exactly the same thing after me. So when I got back to New Zealand, along with this friend and another friend of mine, I ended up back heading up to Gisborne for my early years in the hospital for hospital training. So Gisborne, if you don't know it, is a really beautiful place up on the east coast of the North Island of New Zealand. It's got amazing beaches, a large Māori population, Māori of the indigenous people of New Zealand, but it's also, unfortunately, one of the most underserved regions of the country. So we noticed during our time in the hospital, there were lots of patients coming in with chronic diseases that we knew could be prevented or reversed with the kinds of interventions we've been learning about. So what we did was we set up this community-based lifestyle intervention that we've mentioned already, a study we called the Broad Study. So we enrolled about 30 participants and we recorded their outcomes compared to a control group. So the intervention group got the lifestyle intervention, which was basically 2 sessions a week for 12 weeks, with us talking to them about whole food plant-based nutrition. And also they got to cook with some chefs during that time as well. So they'd learn not just about the technical aspects, but also the practical aspects too. And so that study actually showed the greatest weight loss ever recorded at 6 and 12 months for a community-based, non-calorie restricted lifestyle intervention. And we weren't asking them to exercise either. So on average, people lost 11.5 kilograms. That's 25 pounds for most of you in a year. And we also saw improvements in blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes control, and quality of life, which is really important. And that was all just from eating more whole plant-based foods. It was published in Nutrition and Diabetes, and it's now been cited nearly 400 times, including in Dr. Greger's How Not to Diet. So after that, I took some time out to write the course that I'm going to be sharing with you today. And these days, as Michael mentioned, I work part-time as a GP, what we call general practice in New Zealand, which is very similar to family medicine. And I try to talk to patients every day about lifestyle change, especially the benefits of eating more whole foods from plants. So I'm a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, a fellow of the Australasian Society of Lifestyle Medicine. I'm certified by the International Board of Lifestyle Medicine, and I'm a board director for Doctors for Nutrition, which is an Australasian-based health promotion charity. And our vision is a world free from preventable disease. And as many of you watching the summit will know, that's not just a pipe dream, and it's really achievable if we adopt whole food plant-based eating at scale. So I'm currently also in the process of setting up a brand new charity that will provide medically tailored meals to patients in New Zealand. And I'm heading back to Santa Rosa for more training to support that soon. So I'm really excited to share more about that in the future. And but for now, I'll get my screen shared so that we can get started. Okay, so today the plan is for me to share the most powerful insights from my 21st century food course. And I'll just see if I can get this to minimize. Perfect. So this is the book that I wish I'd had when I was starting out. It's fun, colorful, really down to earth. And there's lots of practical information, real world tips, and a few good stories to help you head in a way that helps you look good, feel great, and accidentally save the planet in just 6 weeks. So that's what today's talk's all about. And at the end, I'll give you some simple practical takeaways so you can take some action today. So before we get started, though, I just want to acknowledge the work, ideas, and inspiration of everyone listed here. I especially want to acknowledge Dr. John McDougall. As many of you will know, he sadly passed away last year, but like many of you, I wish I'd had a chance to spend some more time with him, to catch up again, and just to learn more from him. But I'm really incredibly grateful for the time that I did get to spend with him and the enormous impact that he made for his work. So it's only fitting that he was always first on the list for us. So before we even get started as well, first up, I better explain what a whole plant-based food is because I've already been talking about it an awful lot. I'm going to be talking about it an awful lot more today. So a whole plant-based food is four things. Firstly, it's whole. So we can say a food's whole when it's minimally processed. And for now, we can just think of processing as any extra stuff that might be done to your food to transform it from its natural state to the meal that's on your plate. Secondly, it's plant-based. So foods from plants include fruits, vegetables, beans and legumes and grains. And these are foods that you could have plucked from a tree, picked from a bush, or pulled from the earth. Three, it's food. So hopefully everyone here knows what food is. Otherwise, it's going to be a very long presentation. And four, as I've said before, it's something that I'm going to be talking an awful lot about today. So let's have a go at that with some popular breakfast options. So first up, we have yogurt. Is it from a plant? Well, nowadays it probably could be because there's so many different types you can get like soy yogurt and coconut yogurt, but let's just assume it's a dairy yogurt. So no, it's not from a plant, so that's an automatic fail. The next contender is Cocoa Pops. Is it from a plant? Technically, yes, but how close is it to something plucked from a tree, picked from a bush, or pulled from the earth? So it's not, it's highly processed, so that would be another fail. And now for the last one of my favorites, bananas. Is it from a plant? Yes. How close is it to something plucked from a tree, picked from a bush, or pulled from the earth? Well, obviously it's plucked from a tree, so that's a whole plant-based food. And the first thing that whole plant-based foods are going to do for you is they're going to help you to look good and feel great. And one of the best and most exciting ways that they're going to do this is by giving you plenty of energy. So whole plant-based foods are an ideal source of energy for the human body. They're rich in complex carbohydrates, which is the body's preferred fuel, especially for the brain and muscles. So unlike processed foods or high-fat meals that can cause energy crashes or sluggishness, whole plant-based foods provide a steady, sustained release of energy, thanks to their fiber, their water content, and the nutrient density. Now, when you eat whole plant-based foods, you're giving your body the cleanest, most efficient energy nature has to offer. Now, as many of you will know, your body is built to store energy. So it has these natural battery packs in your muscles and liver that are called glycogen. So these stores provide fast, accessible energy when you haven't eaten in a little while or when your muscles are working extra hard. So whole plant-based foods provide the best fuel for filling and maintaining these reserves. So when you eat whole plant-based foods, you're not just fueling the moment, you're also recharging your body's energy reserves, giving yourself lasting power for whatever's going to come next. And blood flow. So this is again something I'm going to be talking about time and again today. So the better that your blood flows, the more efficiently oxygen and nutrients reach every single cell in your body, from your muscles and heart to your brain. Improved circulation means more energy, better stamina, and a sharper mental focus. Whole plant-based foods support healthy, flexible blood vessels and help your blood maintain or return to its optimal fluidity, so your body can perform at its best meal after meal. So you might not know this, but your brain actually uses up to 20% of your body's energy at rest, which is more than any other organ. And it doesn't just power your thoughts. Your motivation, focus, creativity, and your mood all rely on steady, high-quality fuel. So whole plant-based foods are packed with complex carbohydrates, as we've talked about, which break down into glucose, the primary and preferred energy source for your brain. The energy in whole plant-based foods is naturally packaged with fiber and nutrients that slow digestion, leading to a gradual, steady release of glucose into your bloodstream. This helps your body maintain stable blood sugar levels and improves your ability to manage energy throughout the day. With balanced blood sugar, you're more likely to feel alert, energized, and content, and you'll stay fully satisfied for longer after meals. Now, this was one of the neatest things that we saw during our study. So when someone starts moving more, it's not always this conscious decision or a feat of willpower. Sometimes it seems to simply be the body responding to a better fuel. So as you eat more whole plant-based foods, your body becomes more energized, your blood flows more freely, and your mood lifts, which often triggers this unconscious increase in physical activity. From there, a positive feedback loop begins, and the more that you move, the stronger and more resilient you become, and the more energy you have to keep going. So eating more whole foods from plants is also going to improve your appearance, and it may even help to slow the aging process. So modern science is helping us to understand why the world's longest lived communities eat mostly or even entirely whole plant-based foods. So telomeres, which are these little protective caps at the end of our chromosomes, they shorten as we age. But studies suggest that a plant-based lifestyle may help to slow or even reverse this process, preserving your cells and your vitality for longer. In contrast, animal products can raise levels of IGF-1, leucine, and mTOR enzyme activity, which are all biological signals that accelerate aging and increase disease risk when chronically elevated. Whole foods from plants also reduce inflammation and support natural detoxification. So in cultures that eat mostly whole plant-based foods, acne is almost unheard of. As you'll know, this is in stark contrast to in the Western world, where it affects the vast majority of teens and also many adults. Dairy is a major contributor because it increases hormonal activity and enzyme production linked to acne. In contrast, whole plant-based foods may help regulate these effects. They promote healthy blood flow to the skin, reduce inflammation and pore clogging fats, and provide antioxidants that protect and repair skin cells, all of which support a clearer, healthier complexion. Plant-based diets may even offer protection against some skin cancers. You may also know that your skin is the most exposed organ in your body. It's constantly influenced by both the internal processes and the external environment. So whole plant-based foods are packed with antioxidants like flavonoids, carotenoids, and vitamin C, which help to defend against oxidative stress and sun damage, which are two major drivers of premature aging. In fact, eating more green and yellow vegetables has been linked to fewer visible wrinkles and a healthier skin tone. Plants also support skin hydration thanks to their naturally high water content. So watermelons, strawberries, cucumbers, tomatoes, cauliflower, spinach, red cabbage, and peppers are all over 90% water. So when it comes to your eyes, they have really tiny little blood vessels, and they need a steady, healthy flow of blood to help keep your vision sharp and your eyes bright. Whole plant-based foods, as we've talked about, support this optimal circulation, which is really important, especially for these delicate vessels. They also help boost tear production, easing dry or red eyes. Because they're low in salt and rich in water and potassium, whole plant-based foods help your body to release excess fluid, which can reduce under-eye puffiness. And people report better sleep with a whole plant-based diet as well, which means less tired-looking eyes and fewer dark circles. Now, the bright colors in fruits and vegetables come from compounds called carotenoids, which are plant pigments that give your skin a healthy golden glow. One study found that increasing fruit and vegetable intake significantly improves skin color and attractiveness in just 6 weeks. These same antioxidants also offer skin extra protection against UV damage. Compounds like beta-carotene and lycopene have been shown to reduce sunburn redness by up to 40%, and better blood flow also leads to more vibrant looking skin. So that's that blood flow again. So, and then finally, body fat, which obviously we found out a lot about in our broad studies. So the fat that gathers around your waist isn't just a cosmetic concern. Visceral fat, which surrounds your internal organs, is a major driver of chronic inflammation. So eating more whole plant-based foods helps reduce this and support a leaner, healthier body. Certain hormones are found in or stimulated by animal product consumption, and they can also affect how and where body fat is stored. So elevated estrogen levels, for example, might help contribute to the appearance of cellulite, whereas whole plant-based foods, by contrast, help support hormonal balance. And here's what eating more whole foods from plants can do for your mind, mental clarity, and mood. So if you're feeling bloated or sluggish after lunch or dinner, you're not alone. The post-meal energy dip is a well-recognized phenomenon, and in contrast, many people feel lighter, more focused, and energized after breakfast, which is often because it includes more low-fat plant-based foods like your fruit, oats, and other whole grains. Whole foods from plants digest more easily, support healthy blood flow, and stabilize blood sugar, all of which help to minimize that after-meal slump. The result is sharper thinking, better focus, even improved sleep. Now, high-protein whole plant-based foods like leafy greens, mushrooms, legumes, and soy are all excellent for promoting mental clarity and sustained focus throughout the day. Protein-rich meals can increase levels of neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine, which help to support alertness and cognition. Unlike animal-based protein sources, plant-based options are naturally low in fat, especially saturated fat. And that's important because high-fat meals can slow digestion, impair blood flow, and leave you feeling sluggish. Now, while your high-protein plant foods help you to stay focused and alert during the day, your high-starch plant-based foods, such as rice, pasta, and whole grain bread, support serotonin production, which can help you feel more relaxed and ready for sleep at night. Studies even show that eating a kiwi fruit before bed can improve sleep quality, which is likely due to its antioxidants and natural serotonin. Many plant foods also contain melatonin, which you probably know is a hormone that helps support healthy sleep cycles. Whole plant-based foods support restful sleep, which in turn boosts daytime energy, concentration, mood, and even your immune system. So the ability to form, store, and recall memories is one of the most energy-intensive and also most defining tasks that our brain's going to perform. Whole plant-based foods support this process by providing steady energy from complex carbohydrates, improved blood flow, essential nutrients, and reduced inflammation and oxidative stress. Many whole plant-based foods are also rich in flavonoids, which are natural compounds that have been shown to enhance memory and cognitive performance. Whole plant-based foods are also naturally low in advanced glycation end products, or AGEs, which are harmful compounds fittingly linked to brain aging and cognitive decline. And these are found in far higher amounts in animal-based and processed foods. So basically, the more plants you eat, the better equipped your brain is to hold on to the moments that matter most. The brain is made up of around 70% water, and even mild dehydration can cause it to shrink slightly, which affects performance and unsurprisingly can trigger headaches and migraines. Whole plant-based foods are naturally high in water, helping to support hydration and brain function throughout the day. These foods are also rich, as we've talked about, in antioxidants and polyphenols, especially flavonoids, which have been linked to better memory, attention, and faster cognitive processing. Now, when it comes to omega-3 fatty acids, they're easily found in walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds, and leafy greens, all of which provide ALA, which is a plant-based omega-3 that the body can convert to EPA and DHA. Now, numerous studies have found that eating more whole plant-based foods is associated with an improved mood and a reduced risk of depression. These benefits may stem from a variety of factors, including less exposure to processed foods, better gut health, increased intake of brain-supportive nutrients, and reduced inflammation, including in the brain. The emotional boost from feeling better, sleeping more soundly, and having more energy is real. And when you know that your food choices are helping not just yourself, but animals and the planet too, it's hard not to feel more hopeful and empowered. So now we move on to infamous foods, the truth about the most attention-seeking ingredients. And first up, it's oil. So while olive oil might have helped us to ditch lard, it's not exactly a health food. The OG Mediterranean diet was more chickpeas and chard than cheese and oil. So in the 1950s, rates of heart disease in Crete were 20 times lower than in the United States. Their traditional diet, though, was over 90% plant-based, rich in vegetables, legumes, grains, and fruit, and it included very little meat, cheese, or oil. Fast forward 50 years, as meat, dairy, and processed foods, including large amounts of oil, became more common, heart disease rates rose to levels comparable to the US. The original Mediterranean diet, the one associated with the exceptional health and longevity, was largely whole food, plant-based. They're focused on leafy greens, legumes, pasta, fruits, and vegetables with only just modest amounts of oil and the occasional glass of fermented grape juice. So oils are some of the most energy-dense substances that we eat. They're packed with calories, but they offer very little else. In fact, while I'm certainly not recommending butter or ice cream, they at least contain small amounts of protein, calcium, or other nutrients. By comparison, oils almost entirely empty calories. Because oil lacks fiber, bulk, and water, it doesn't activate the body's natural satiety signals, which means that it's really easy to overconsume without even realizing it. All it really does is adds extra energy to meals that are already satisfying and nourishing on their own. Oil is 100% fat, which means that it delivers maximum calories in the smallest volume, which is exactly why it's so easy to overeat. Take potatoes, for example. Naturally, they're only about 1% fat, but when you turn them into French fries, that jumps to over 40% fat. Just 2 tablespoons of oil packs about the same energy as a chocolate bar or a large scoop of premium ice cream, but without the fiber, protein, or fullness, or the taste. A simple drizzle of oil on your salad might seem like a harmless thing, but it can significantly alter the calorie content, the nutrient profile, and how that meal affects your energy, mood, and weight. So all oils, yep, even extra virgin olive, flaxseed, coconut oil can impair your blood vessels' ability to expand and relax, making your heart work harder and reducing your circulatory performance. So high-fat meals, including those with oil, have been shown to temporarily reduce blood flow and may also negatively impact oxygen exchange and immune function. Oil is one of the leading contributors to excess calorie intake and weight gain, and when oil is heated to high temperatures, especially in frying, it creates harmful compounds like acrylamide and aldehydes, which are associated with an increased cancer risk, regardless of whether the oil or food is plant-based. So only 3 to 5% of your daily calories absolutely have to come from fat, and you can meet this easily by just eating whole plant-based foods. Most oil we don't add for flavor, but we just add it out of habit. So fortunately, that means it's an easy habit to break. From fresh bread to pasta sauce to salad dressings and even cakes, oil-free versions can be just as delicious, sometimes even better. And here's the best part. The less oil you use, the less you're going to miss it. Your taste buds will reset and you start to notice the fresh, vibrant flavors and textures that were hidden under all of that grease. So oil's arguably one of the most processed foods on the planet. It's pure concentrated fat, stripped of all the fiber, water, and nutrients that nature packaged it with. Our bodies were never designed to handle this kind of fat in liquid form, and until recently, humans were never able to consume it in such quantities. To make just 1 liter of oil, you're going to need around 1,000 olives, 60 ears of corn, or 50 avocados. And in any case, most of the oil ends up in highly processed foods, to which is added cheaply to enhance texture and taste. Oil is used to engineer food for maximum pleasure, and it targets what the industry calls our bliss point, overriding our natural hunger signals and contributing to weight gain and thereby chronic disease. Next up, we have avocado and coconut. So avocados and coconuts are often praised for their healthy fats, but the issue isn't really the type of fat, it's the amount. Both are around 85% fat by calories, making them amongst the highest fat whole plant-based foods in nature. Even though avocado fats are more heart-friendly than coconut saturated fats, they can still slow blood flow, affect arterial function, and reduce physical performance when we consume them in excess. So these aren't everyday staples, they're occasional indulgences from nature. Most of the fat in avocados is monounsaturated, while coconuts is over 90% saturated fat. We've long been told to replace saturated fats like butter and coconut with monounsaturated fats like avocado and olive oil to lower our cholesterol. But when it comes to our overall vascular health, the difference might not be as significant as we've been led to believe. So emerging research shows that even monounsaturated fats, especially when consumed in large amounts or as oils, they might still impair our blood vessel function, particularly after meals. And whether you're vegetarian, vegan, or omnivorous, it's still common to consume more fat than your body needs. In reality, just 10 to 15% of your daily calories from fat is enough to support health, fuel performance, and help reset your taste buds. So refined oils, including avocado and coconut oil, are still ultra-processed, nutrient-poor, and calorie-dense. They're essentially pure fat, just like any other oil. And despite what the internet might say, there's nothing magical about these refined plant oils. So to look and feel your best, it really helps to think of avocados and coconuts as nature's treats. Even in their organic, whole, unprocessed forms, as I mentioned, these foods are extremely high in fat, and so they're best enjoyed occasionally rather than every day. Avocado might be best known as guacamole, but it's also a versatile substitute for butter and oil in rich plant-based recipes like mousse, chocolate cake, cheesecake, creamy dips, spreads, and dressings. If we reframe these high-fat plant foods from health staples into treats, you naturally eat them less often and you're going to appreciate them more. So our other coconut-based products like desiccated coconut, coconut milk, cream, and ice cream are unfortunately much like coconut oil, extremely high in saturated fat. Many coconut treats also contain refined sugar, making them high fat, high sugar, low fiber processed foods, often less nutritious and higher in fat than traditional junk food. The one exception is coconut water, which is 94% water and just 2% fat. So while there's no strong evidence of specific health benefits yet, if you enjoy it, why not? If you love avocado, it's totally fine to have it every now and then. But if you're on a journey toward better health or body composition, like the participants in our broad study were, it can really help to take a break from the high-fat foods like avocado and coconut for a little while and explore new flavors from the wide world of whole plant-based foods. Coconut milk is popular in Thai curries, baking, and tropical drinks, but there are plenty of lower fat alternatives. Other plant-based milks, maybe with a little bit of coconut essence to keep that flavor there. Fruit purees for baking, so banana, apple, or pear, for example, or you can use a pinch of cornstarch or tapioca flour to thicken your sauces. Keep avocado and coconut for special dishes or celebrations. And finally, today we have everyone's favorite, especially around this time of year, which is chocolate. So while we've all seen the headlines claiming chocolate is good for us, the truth is a little more bittersweet. These studies usually focus on real dark chocolate, which is typically at least 70% cocoa, which contains significantly higher levels of flavonoids and antioxidants compared to regular milk chocolate. In fact, some of the most promising studies use forms of chocolate or cocoa extract that are so pure and bitter, they're not even available to the general public. Most chocolate sold in stores includes a long list of added ingredients, including refined sugar, milk powder, salt, and partially hydrogenated oils like palm, soybean, or cottonseed. So true chocolate is made primarily from cocoa solids, chocolate liquor, and some cocoa butter, but that's obviously not what you're getting in the average chocolate bar. Cocoa and cacao powders are a great way to enjoy a rich chocolatey flavor with less processing and far less fat than traditional chocolate. So even high quality dark chocolate is a store processed food, typically containing added sugar and averaging around 50 to 55% fat. While cocoa and cacao powders are still relatively high in fat, you only need a small amount, and when mixed with other whole plant-based foods, the fat's quickly diluted. So whether you use cocoa or cacao, they can both be combined with whole plant ingredients to create delicious chocolatey tasting recipes. So when you need chocolate fix, try recipes that combine cocoa powder with other wholesome plant-based ingredients. Some tasty examples include black bean brownies, silken tofu fudgesicles, chocolate oatmeal for breakfast, a mug of hot cocoa, or even one of the many plant-based chocolate milks that's now available. If you do go for chocolate, choose the real deal. At least 70% cocoa solids and ideally high-quality dark chocolate. Try dark chocolate infused with flavors like coffee, vanilla, chili, lavender, basil, or lemongrass. And you might even like carob, which is a naturally sweet, caffeine-free alternative to cocoa that's just 7% fat and offers a distinct earthy flavor all of its own. So chocolate is obviously deeply woven into our culture, from Easter and Valentine's Day to Halloween and Christmas. So it's no surprise that we're eager to believe any good news about chocolate, and the media, of course, knows this. And that's why there's a constant stream of articles celebrating the latest chocolate-related study, no matter how preliminary, overstated, or misinterpreted the findings might be. While chocolate does, of course, contain antioxidants and trace nutrients, the reality is that most of these potential benefits are dwarfed by the sugar, fat, and dairy packed into most commercial chocolate products. So in pre-conquest Mexico, cocoa wasn't just a food, it was in fact a currency. Cocoa beans were roasted, ground, and consumed only by the elite. Moctezuma II, the emperor of the Aztecs, is said to have consumed up to 60 portions of whipped bitter chocolate from a golden goblet each day. So while the Maya and Aztecs used cacao to make a frothy, unsweetened beverage, it wasn't until the 19th century that chocolate became heavily processed. This shifted what was obviously a once ceremonial rare drink into something mass-produced and overconsumed. Now, chocolate contains a mix of compounds that interact with the brain's reward and pleasure pathways, including caffeine, theobromine, and phenylethylamine, or the love chemical. These compounds have been linked to sensations of pleasure, calm, infatuation, and even exhilaration, which helps to explain why chocolate is so universally loved. Now, naloxone, which is a drug that blocks the brain's opioid receptors, can actually reduce the desire for high-fat, high-sugar foods, including chocolate, which suggests that these foods can trigger reward circuits in a drug-like way. Now, as you shift toward a diet of more whole plant-based foods, your cravings for hyperpalatable foods like chocolate tend to diminish anyway, and your brain becomes more sensitive to the natural, subtler sources of pleasure. So let's move on to some practical tips for eating more whole foods from plants. We'll start out with substitutes, replacements, and better ingredients. So if you ask most people who are changing to plant-based what the hardest food to give up is, the answer is almost always cheese. So it's fatty, salty, comforting, and it's everywhere. Our brains are wired to seek out these energy-dense foods, and aside from pure oils, cheese is among the highest, with around 74% of its calories from fat, which is even higher than bacon. But just like cookies go better with milk than with broccoli, cheese goes better with other processed foods than with whole plant-based foods anyway. So as you make more changes to your diet, cheese starts to feel less essential and your cravings will begin to fade. So many mild, firm cheeses like your cottage cheese, ricotta, and paneer can easily be replaced with firm tofu. This works really well because it absorbs the flavors of whatever you season and cook it with. For creamy cheeses like cream cheese or mascarpone, try using your silken tofu, sweet potato, pureed white beans, even a little bit of avocado. Add ingredients like lemon juice, vinegar, nutritional yeast, garlic, or herbs to create deliciously creamy sauces, dips, or spreads that are rich and satisfying. And for sweet dishes like cheesecake, mousse, or tarts, those same whole food ingredients, especially silken tofu, sweet potato, or avocado, can create smooth, indulgent textures. Now, when it comes to replacing oils, many soups, stews, and sauces traditionally begin by sauteing their ingredients in oil, but you don't actually need it. So try using water, wine, vegetable stock, or even the cooking liquid from beans or lentils. If you just add some small splashes as needed, this keeps things from sticking, and your onions and vegetables will still soften, brown, caramelize, and release their natural sugars and flavors. Some delicious oil-free plant-based soups and stews include potato leek, pumpkin or butternut squash soup, minestrone, and Moroccan bean stew, or try a spicy plant-based chili or vegetable curry. So in baked goods that call for pure fat, like butter, vegetable oil, olive oil, or coconut oil, simply replace with whole plant-based ingredients. For sweet treats, try using applesauce, mashed banana, jams, or jellies, pureed dates, or prunes. And for savory dishes, you can use silky vegetables like pumpkin, potato, eggplant, which can make excellent oil substitutes in your breads, risottos, soups, gravies, and sauces. Also, again, don't forget about avocado. It's the secret ingredient behind some of the best chocolate cake and cheesecake you'll ever taste. How about eggs? So eggs are obviously often used in baking to help bind ingredients and make them light and fluffy. But you don't need eggs, and whole plant-based alternatives can do the job just as well, with the added bonus of being cholesterol-free. For sweet treats like cakes or muffins, try applesauce or mashed banana. You can add a little bit of extra baking powder. For breads or pancakes, you can use a tablespoon of ground chia seeds or flax seeds mixed with 3 tablespoons of water. Aquafaba, the liquid from canned or cooked chickpeas, can be whipped into soft peaks, making it perfect for meringues, pavlovas, macaroons. And for recipes calling for egg whites, agar-agar is another great option. So while eggs might be the traditional symbol for breakfast, whole plant-based foods have been sharing the morning table with us for generations. Think of all the classics: oatmeal and bananas, pancakes and waffles, hash browns, mushrooms, tomatoes, baked beans, toast with peanut butter and jam, even the timeless continental breakfast. If you're still missing eggs, though, you can make a tofu scramble. So firm tofu has a texture strikingly similar to scrambled eggs. It soaks up the flavor of whatever you season it with. Turmeric, black salt, garlic, herbs, and veggies work beautifully. And finally, on to meat. So we're culturally obsessed with getting enough protein, yet the average Westerner already consumes nearly double the recommended amount. So all whole plant-based foods contain protein, and the more whole that they are, the more protein they contain. So even if you got all of your energy for the day from nothing but potatoes and corn, you'd still get about 10 to 15% of your calories from protein, which is more than enough. There's no need to combine foods or worry about whether your protein is complete. And if you're still unsure, then consider this. Some of the largest and strongest animals on Earth, like elephants, rhinos, and gorillas, build their powerful bodies entirely on plants. So while only a portion of the global population eats meat regularly, over 70 billion land animals and an estimated 1 to 2 trillion fish are killed for food each year. In the US, the average person will consume more than 21,000 animals over their lifetime. The World Health Organization has classified processed meats as a Group 1 carcinogen, and even unprocessed red meat is linked with earlier mortality and increased disease risk. If a recipe includes meat, try leaving it out or substituting it with plant-based ingredients that offer a similar bulk, texture, or satisfaction, like tofu, tempeh, or beans, rice, bulgur, millet, or couscous, or you can use chunky vegetables like potato, pumpkin, portobello mushrooms, carrots, cauliflower, or eggplant. Let's move on to how to tackle social occasions. So these days, it's obviously easier than ever to connect with like-minded people, many of you doing that at the moment. So online communities are full of people ready to share recipes, offer advice, and cheer you on as you eat more whole foods from plants. So look for groups with whole food plant-based or WFPB in their name. Of course, there's also a lot of vegan resources online, especially nowadays. And just keep in mind that vegan recipes aren't always designed with health in mind. So many are going to include your processed or high-fat plant-based ingredients. That having been said, these recipes are usually really easy to adapt. So with barbecue season coming up for you guys in the United States, whole foods from plants, fortunately, are really grill-friendly and crowd-pleasing. So fire up the grill and try your homemade or store-bought veggie burgers and sausages, grilled courgettes, eggplant, capsicums, or portobello mushrooms, veggie kebabs with tofu, pineapple, and peppers, corn on the cob. You can make a pasta or potato salad that's oil-free, or you can even do carrot dogs and jackfruit pulled pork. So when food's delicious, here's the secret. Nobody cares if it's whole food and plant-based. So here's some easy crowd-pleasing plant-based options for your next social gathering. Hummus with veggie sticks, guacamole and salsa with baked corn chips, baked wedges with creamy tofu sour cream, some fresh fruit kebabs, olives with pita bread, mini bean burritos, rice paper or spring rolls, and baked samosas. So sharing stories with your friends and family is part of what brings us together. And chances are they're going to be just as curious about your shift towards whole food plant-based eating as they are about your recent holiday, your new job, or your relationship. Probably even more interested, to be fair. It helps to have a few simple explanations or facts ready and just tailor them to how much you feel like talking. If you're not in the mood for a deep dive, you can always say something like Doug Lyle suggests, which is, it's just something I'm trying out and it seems to be working for me. You might be surprised though, because these conversations are often where you'll discover great recipe ideas, unexpected support, and maybe even some new inspiration. When you're invited over, it's totally okay to let your host know what you eat. They'll likely appreciate the heads up and may even prepare something just for you. A simple way to explain it is saying that you're eating meat and dairy free, and offering a few of your favorite meals or ingredients can be really helpful. If you're bringing a dish, bring something that you love, because if it's delicious to you, chances are that others are really going to enjoy it too. And it's also a great way to introduce people to tasty plant-based food without making it a thing. If you don't have any control over the menu, just have a bite beforehand. And once you're there, you might be surprised at how many plant-based staples are on offer. So bread, potatoes, rice, pasta, corn, fruit, and salads often make a solid showing. Now, if you're eating well at home, it's okay to relax a little bit in social settings. After all, the most important part is the connections and the memories, not just the contents of your plate. So finding a meat and dairy-free meal is often an easy thing to do, but oil-free and processed options can be trickier, unprocessed options, sorry, can be trickier when you're dining out or at someone else's place. So just remember, eating more whole foods from plants is about being kind to the planet, to animals, and most importantly, to yourself. Which leads really nicely into dining out. So as we've talked about, good food can enhance the dining experience, but what really matters is the company that you're with. So when you're out with your friends or colleagues, it's okay to go with the flow a little bit. Most menus have something plant-based to work with, a salad, a side of veggies, a grain bowl, or something you can customize. So do your best to make dining out about the experience, not just the ingredients. That having been said, with a few simple tricks, you can enjoy a whole food plant-based meal, even at a Texas roadside steakhouse. So start where most people do, which is with the appetizers. you'll often find a surprising number of plant-based options. When it comes to mains, most dishes can be easily adapted with just one or two simple changes. Try, for example, salsa instead of aioli or creamy dressings, steamed or grilled instead of sauteed. Hold the cheese on pizzas or pastas. Nowadays, you have to ask them to hold the vegan cheese as well. Lemon juice or balsamic vinegar instead of oil-based dressings. Fruit or sorbet in the place of ice cream. Now, if you're dining out and still want to enjoy a meal that's in the same style as everyone else, here are a few easy tricks. So plan ahead. So once you have a few restaurants in mind, casually suggest one to your friends early. Mention a couple of dishes that they might enjoy. Check the menu in advance, look online, or give the restaurant a quick call. Ask if they offer vegan options, because that's the term that most staff will recognize. And when you call ahead, politely suggest a dish or ask if the chef can adapt something. Most restaurants are really happy to accommodate if they've got a bit of notice. So almost every other culture around the world is more whole plant-based than we are. In fact, it's estimated that just 15 crop plants provide 90% of the world's food energy, with rice, maize, and wheat making up 2/3 of that. So eating plant-based is a delicious way to experience other cultures and cuisines. So you can try exploring Thai, Japanese, Mexican, Ethiopian, Indian, Vietnamese, and Middle Eastern. You might still need to ask for a few modifications, but many traditional dishes in these cultures are already heavily plant-based. Now, as the saying goes, the best way to get what you want is to ask for it. So before you place your order, take a moment to visualize the meal that you want and be ready to describe it simply. So even small requests like holding the cheese, steaming instead of sauteing, or subbing hummus for mayo can make a big difference. So just be friendly and specific, and if the server doesn't repeat your order back, it's perfectly fine to politely double check. Just to confirm, that'll be steamed, no cheese, and hummus instead of the mayo. So love or hate them, the golden arches and their fast food cousins are everywhere. And so chances are one day you'll find yourself in a drive-through or sitting in a red plastic space-age chair wondering what to order. Fortunately, most burger chains now offer plant-based options, and customizing your order is totally normal. Hold the mayo, skip the cheese, swap the patty, it's all business as usual. Buffet-style spots like Subway, Chipotle, or local salad and grain bowl chains are even easier. You choose exactly what you want. And when it comes to fast food, ethnic cuisines often do it better than the West. Veggie sushi, bean burritos, tom yum soup, falafel wraps, chana masala are all just as quick and satisfying as a burger and fries, but often they're lighter, healthier, and more full of plants. And finally, let's talk about how you can accidentally save the planet just by eating more whole foods from plants. Let's start with one of the greatest social, environmental, and human rights challenges that the world has ever faced, climate change. So the climate crisis is here. We've already lost 40% of our Arctic sea ice. Our oceans have become 30% more acidic. The atmosphere is holding more water than ever, and we're seeing record-breaking temperatures and extreme weather events. So while the blame often falls on corporations and governments, and rightly so, our food choices actually play a major role. So every year we use enormous and unsustainable resources to raise billions of animals for food. Land, water, feed, and energy that could be used far more efficiently. Switching to whole foods from plants immediately slashes your impact on emissions, land use, and water waste, and is the most powerful step you can personally take to help fight climate change. So some estimates suggest that animal agriculture may contribute 30% or even more of global greenhouse gas emissions. Producing animal protein also requires significantly more energy. On average, more than 8 times the fossil fuel input compared to plant protein. Beef and lamb are especially resource intensive, requiring 50 times more energy than they return in food energy. The carbon footprint of raising animals for food adds up really quickly. Land and crops used to feed and graze them, enormous methane and carbon dioxide emissions, transportation, slaughter, and processing. So it's a system that burns through natural resources to produce far less food than what plants can, with a far greater environmental cost. So animal agriculture is responsible for at least as much greenhouse gas emissions as all forms of global transportation combined. Reducing global beef consumption by just a fifth, just 20%, could have a climate impact equal to or greater than switching the entire global car fleet to electric vehicles. And of course, the emissions from doing this would also be so much less because we wouldn't need to make all of those cars. If every American swapped a chicken meal for a plant-based meal once a week, the impact would be like taking 500,000 cars off US roads, and replacing red meat and dairy just once a week is equivalent to driving 1,800 fewer kilometers every year. So while human population growth is often blamed for environmental strain, the real population problem is livestock. While human population grows by less than, well, around 1% per year, livestock numbers have grown by more than 2% annually, which is driven by this rising global demand for meat and dairy. By 2050, meat consumption is projected to increase by 70%, dairy by 60%, and the number of farmed animals raised each year could hit 120 billion. In the UK, the average person eats their own body weight in meat every year. In the US, it's 1.5 times. This was never healthy for us, and it's certainly not healthy for the planet. So the Amazon rainforest plays a role in climate regulation and carbon storage that is absolutely vital. Since the 1970s, more than 230,000 square miles, which is 25% of the Amazon, has been deforested. Now, an estimated 91% of that land has been cleared to raise animals for meat and dairy production, particularly beef. While animals consume oxygen and emit carbon dioxide, plants do the opposite. Switching to whole foods from plants uses far less land than grazing livestock, which creates space for reforestation, helping to restore natural carbon sinks and rebuild ecosystems. Globally, there's this stark imbalance in who's contributing to climate change. The wealthiest 1% of people are responsible for more than double the emissions of the poorest 50%. Meanwhile, over 1 billion people produce virtually no emissions at all, simply because they don't consume enough to leave a footprint. So that means that we are the 1%, and we're the ones who need to cut back on our overconsumption. But what should we give up? For the first time in history, there are now more people overweight than underweight, and that tracks closely with the rise in highly processed and resource-intensive foods. By choosing less processed, whole plant-based foods, we can reclaim our health, help protect the planet, and build a more equitable future. So airplanes, iPads, fireworks, and long showers all bring us joy. So let's keep them around for a bit, because our food choices are where we can make the biggest impact at the moment every single day. Next up is livestock. So raising a single cow, whether it's grass-fed or grain-fed, can require anywhere from 2 to 30 acres of land. Livestock now occupies 70% of all agricultural land and contribute to the use of up to 45% of the Earth's total landmass. The land demands of animal agriculture are a leading driver of deforestation, contributing to the destruction of nearly 1 acre of forest every second, or about 16 tennis courts worth of land. In contrast, plant-based crops use a fraction of the land and can supply all of humanity's food needs. So shifting away from animal agriculture would free up enormous areas of land for reforestation and rewilding, helping to restore our ecosystems, clean our air and water, and protect our biodiversity. Many of the most serious infectious diseases in human history, including influenza and measles, originated in domesticated animals. Today, the intensive conditions of factory farming continue to create the perfect breeding ground for emerging diseases and for the development of antibiotic resistance. In fact, the overuse of antibiotics in livestock is now a leading cause of the rise in drug-resistant bacteria. So more antibiotics are given to animals than to humans, which speeds up the evolution of superbugs that are no longer responding to treatment. Animal products are also common carriers of pathogens like Salmonella, E. coli, Campylobacter, and Shigella, all of which can cause serious illness for us. So in many parts of the world, native animals are labeled as pests simply because they compete with livestock for space, food, or water. To protect farm animals and their feed crops, native species are trapped, relocated, hunted, and killed. The greatest threat to wildlife is habitat loss, and animal agriculture is the single largest driver of this. The current rate of species extinction is 1,000 to 10,000 times the natural background rate. 1 in 8 bird species, 1 in 3 amphibians, and 1 in 4 mammals now faces an extremely high risk of extinction, which is largely due to land cleared for grazing and feed crops. Endangered species impacted by deforestation and habitat encroachment include the orangutan, the jaguar, the Indian elephant, and the last 2,500 Bengal tigers that are left in the wild. A single industrial dairy farm with 2,500 cows can produce more raw waste than a city of 400,000 people. and animal waste is hardly ever treated. Manure from factory farms contains not only bacteria and parasites, but also antibiotics, hormones, and resistant pathogens, all of which can leach into our soil, groundwater, and nearby waterways. Much of this waste is stored in large outdoor pits, which can emit harmful gases like ammonia and hydrogen sulfide that can contaminate the air and overflow during heavy rains, polluting rivers and streams. While manure is often used as fertilizer, it's far less efficient. When crops are first fed to animals, much of the nutrient value is lost, and what's left can be toxic if over-applied. If we simply return these crops straight to the soil as plant-based compost, we'd have a safer, more sustainable source of fertilizer. So when land's cleared for livestock or their feed crops, native plants are removed, suppressed, or outcompeted, and those that remain face an onslaught of new environmental pressures. So grazing animals are going to trample seedlings, damage roots and bark, compact the soil, and leave behind manure and urine that can overload ecosystems with nutrients. Their movement also spreads invasive weeds, increases the risk of wildfire, and alters the microclimate by exposing the soil and reducing moisture-retaining vegetation. When monocultures of corn, soy, and other feed crops are introduced, they bring along pesticides, synthetic fertilizers, and non-native pathogens that can further harm native flora. Over time, these pressures can permanently alter ecosystems, and in some cases, these can erase entire plant communities and the species that rely on them. And finally, livestock grazing is a major driver of land degradation. It destroys native vegetation, compacts the soil, and accelerates erosion, causing the loss of topsoil up to 6 times faster than plant-based farming systems. The world has already lost half its topsoil, and we continue to lose more every year. As much as 20 million acres of farmable land are lost annually to desertification, which is the transformation of once productive land into barren, infertile dust. While not all grazing land is suitable for crops, a large proportion of it could be repurposed to grow diverse plant-based foods or return to forest and native vegetation. This shift would create a healthier, more efficient food system and give the land a chance to recover, regenerate, and support life once again. And finally, let's move on to our oceans. So an estimated 1 to 2 trillion fish are pulled from the ocean every year. That's a number so large it's nearly impossible to comprehend. Around 7% of fish species are threatened with extinction, and 34% of global fish stock are currently overfished. In just the last 60 years, we've wiped out 90% of our large predatory fish populations like sharks, tuna, and cod. The Atlantic bluefin tuna has declined by up to 96%, with a single fish selling at auction for $1.8 million in 2013, and while that was a publicity stunt, it's also a grim symbol of how rare they've become. Marine scientists have warned that if the current trends continue, most commercial fish populations could collapse by mid-century, throwing entire ocean ecosystems out of balance and risking food security for millions. In 2011, the fishing industry landed around 98 million tons of seafood, but they may have caught an additional 26 to 78 million tons of unwanted marine life, known as bycatch. Bycatch includes fish, turtles, seabirds, and marine mammals, most of which are thrown back into the sea dead or dying. Shrimp trawling is one of the most wasteful fishing methods. It produces only 2% of the world's seafood, but it generates around a third of all bycatch. Industrial fishing gear can be massive. So drift nets stretch for up to 30 miles, and long lines can span over 120 kilometers, which is longer than the distance from here to space. Every year, an estimated 300,000 whales, dolphins, and porpoises, 250,000 endangered sea turtles, and 300,000 seabirds are killed accidentally in fishing operations. So fish farms now produce more than half of all seafood consumed globally, and about 70% of all salmon sold comes from farms. These farms confine tens of thousands of fish in small pens where disease and parasites spread rapidly, requiring the use of antibiotics. Farm salmon are fed an unnatural high-calorie diet, requiring 1.5 to 8 kilograms of wild fish for every 1 kilogram of salmon meat. This diet makes them fattier, often with lower omega-3 levels and more contaminants than their wild counterparts. To compensate, fish feed is often spiked with omega-3 supplements, the very nutrients wild fish will get naturally from algae. A single farm with 100,000 fish can produce as much nitrogen waste as 32,000 people. which is untreated and released directly into the ocean. In Scotland alone, fish farms generate as much nitrogen pollution as 9 million people without a single sewage plant. So the Marine Stewardship Council is the world's largest certifier of sustainable seafood, and it's recognized by its familiar blue eco-label. But despite its reputation, nearly every fishery that applies for certification is eventually approved. Certification costs range from $30,000 to over $100,000, creating a system where companies essentially pay for approval. So this has raised serious concerns among marine scientists and environmental groups about credibility and transparency. Marine conservation groups like Sea Shepherd argue that all commercial fishing, even certified fishing, is unsustainable, and that the only truly ocean-friendly option is to stop eating fish. Consuming fish is not necessary, not essential for health, and not sustainable, especially when whole plant-based foods can meet all of our needs without destroying ocean life. Over the past 25 years, an estimated tens of thousands of kilometers of fishing nets, much of it non-biodegradable, have been lost or discarded into the ocean. So these are known as ghost nets, and they continue to trap and kill marine life for years. Fishing vessels are also responsible for a significant share of marine pollution. Marine ecosystems are deeply interconnected. So when forage fish like herring and sand eel are overfished, predators like cod and puffins struggle to survive. Targeting apex predators like sharks and tunas disrupts ocean balance, often resulting in algae overgrowth that smothers coral reefs. Today, over 60% of the world's coral reefs are under threat from overfishing, pollution, and warming oceans. The Great Barrier Reef alone has lost more than half of its corals since 1985. And finally, nitrogen runoff. So mostly from animal waste and fertilizer that's used to grow animal feed is creating vast oxygen-depleted areas in our oceans called dead zones. These zones can no longer support marine life. Over the past 50 years, their number has increased eightfold, and today there's more than 400 dead zones worldwide, covering at least 95,000 square kilometers. The Gulf of Mexico's dead zone can rival the size of Massachusetts, while the Baltic Sea hosts the largest permanent dead zone on Earth, which spans over 70,000 square kilometers. Meanwhile, the ocean has absorbed over 525 billion tons of carbon dioxide, becoming 30% more acidic. This is the fastest change in ocean chemistry in 50 million years. These shifts are destabilizing the entire marine ecosystem, from coral reefs to plankton. So hopefully you're feeling a bit inspired to eat as many whole plant-based foods as you can. So let's wrap up with some practical tips that can help you get started right away. So these are things that I've really come to value myself, and the importance of which has been consistently reinforced time and time again since we finished writing the course. So first up, let's talk about habits. So our habits are what help to drive our long-term changes. So daily habits can shape your identity and outcomes, and what you do regularly matters more than what you do occasionally. Habits can help to build momentum, so small wins can lead to bigger wins. So tiny, consistent actions can compound over time and create lasting transformation. And habits can also help to shift your mindset from trying to change what you do to changing who you actually are. So when your actions align with your identity, healthy choices become easy and automatic. So first up, become the kind of person who eats more whole foods from plants. So instead of focusing on what you want to do, focus on who you want to be. So I'm someone who chooses food that helps me feel good, look great, and accidentally save the planet. So every time you eat more whole foods from plants, you're going to help to reinforce this identity. Start small and stack the wins. So add one extra plant to a meal. For example, lentils into a stew or a pasta sauce, some beans with breakfast, some leafy greens like spinach or kale, or even some turmeric and ginger into your smoothie. So use habit stacking. So after, or even better, would be before I make my morning coffee, I'm going to chop up some fruit for breakfast. So keep it enjoyable. And you can drop the all or nothing thinking as well, so you don't have to go 100% overnight. So each plant-based choice is a win. If you slip up, it doesn't matter. Your next bite is a fresh start. So change your story, start small, and most importantly, be kind to yourself. Now, our surroundings or environment are really important. So I've found that it influences a lot what we do, and psychology shows that it significantly shapes our behavior. So it has the potential to make our changes sustainable and make them become a natural part of life, unlike us solely having to rely on our willpower all the time. It also helps to prevent relapse by creating a protective barrier, helping you maintain your progress and avoid any setbacks. So make whole plant-based food the easy choice. So set up your kitchen so that whole plant-based options are front and center. So you've got some fruit on the counter, some prepped veggies in the fridge or frozen in the freezer, some ready-made meals for emergencies, and no junk food or oil in sight, or ideally in the house at all. Make home cooking your default. So stock your pantry. So I've always got some canned tomatoes, some beans. I really like my jackfruit pulled pork, so I've always got some cans of jackfruit there as well. And you can batch cook some basics like your rice, potatoes, quinoa, things like that, and keep it in the fridge or frozen. And keep tools like a blender, a rice cooker, or an air fryer handy so that cooking whole plant-based meals feels easier than ordering out. And finally, shape your shopping environment. This is actually really important. So if you do go shopping at the supermarket or store, then shop with intention. So stick to your produce and whole food aisles. Try and avoid those ultra-processed traps. And in order to facilitate this, you can consider ordering online, which is also likely to save you time and money. Another consideration is going to farmers markets instead, or you can do what I do and you have a fruit and veggie box turn up every week to keep your home stocked with the good stuff. And for me, one of the things that I really dislike is food waste. So if that turns up, then I'm going to be eating those fruits and vegetables, and it just turns up automatically on a subscription. So that's something I've found really helpful. Now, also, community is extremely important. So your community, the people you have around you and surrounding you, can provide accountability and motivation. So others cheering you on to make sure that you're progressing, emotional support, a safe space to share your struggles, seek advice and receive encouragement, and also social connection and belonging. So we're all social beings, and being part of a community helps to boost our self-esteem and confidence. And I really think probably this is one of the reasons that we got some of those fantastic results that we did in the broad study, was because of the power of community in enabling people to make these changes and to maintain them over the long term. So I highly recommend finding or forming a plant-powered circle. So surround yourself with others who are on a similar journey. So ideally that would be a local meetup, but nowadays, online groups are also a possibility, or it could just be a few like-minded friends. So finding a way to share meals is a really good idea too. So make eating social. So you could host potlucks, you could cook together, you can even do batch cooking together at the start of the week, or you might just invite friends to try a plant-based dinner. So why not a plant-based barbecue or even a chili cook-off? And finally, do things that make it easier to connect. So get involved in activities where connection and healthy living overlap. So that might be a walking or a running group with a social aspect, or even a gym. So CrossFit, F45, High Rocks we have over here are all ones that have sort of a social element to them as well, because you're in classes with other people, or maybe you just get a group of your friends who are going to go along together. Cooking classes. So as I mentioned, one of the things that our study participants enjoyed the most, probably more than our talks to them, to be fair, was actually coming every week and learning how to cook a meal with others, and also with a qualified trained chef. So that's a really good way to meet new people as well that are probably interested in the same kinds of things as you are. Also, anything else that's food related. So community gardens are a great thing, especially if you're into the outdoors. And there's other food related projects, which you'll have where you are as well. So there's organizations and charities here now that are really involved in food waste reduction, and also addressing food insecurity. So get involved with some of these groups, make some new friends, and that will really help you along your plant-based journey towards better health. So that was all I had today. We've got through it a little bit more quickly than I thought we would, but that's okay. There should be time for questions. So here's my website if you'd like to connect. You can also find the full 6-week course on our website, which you can afford because we've now just made it pay what you like. So you can choose how much you'd like to contribute for that. And that's the website there, twozestybananas.com, which is an easy one to remember. So kia ora. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to you all today. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and hopefully you got some stuff, some practical tips, and some new ideas that will leave you feeling inspired. And yeah, there's some stuff that you can take away and bring into your own lifestyle from what we've talked about.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson, for all the information that you shared.
Yeah, it
Um,
was a lot of information. Hey, sorry.
and it was a lot.
I thought it would
You
go
went
for a
through it
little bit
very,
longer than that, but that's okay.
yeah, you went through it very quickly, I will say. So, I definitely have some questions and we can do some deep dives. I do want to point out a couple of things. One, I love the saying. I don't know if you can see this here. I'm holding up what is a
It's filtering
sign.
out.
Yeah, it's blurring out. So basically, what it says, I
Oh,
don't know the platitudes per se, but it says exactly what you said. What you do every day matters more than what you do every once in a while. So I think
100%.
it's a
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
great saying. Kind of be good most of the time and forgive yourself when you're not type of thing. So and then I'm also recognizing some of the things that you mentioned, like habit stacking.
Mm.
That from Atomic Habits by Jay.
Yeah, so Atomic Habits and Tiny Habits, which is BJ Fogg's book and things. So yeah, these, yeah, I think are really great resources.
Yeah, highly for the audience, I highly suggest those books. They're really great if you're looking to figure out strategies to make things flow a little easier in your life. Um, I'm gonna dive right in.
Yeah, of course.
So oil and all right. So you mentioned oil,
Yeah, I
and
did.
obviously, yeah, a lot of doctors do not like oil that we've spoken to thus far. What
Mhm.
about oil in things that where it occurs naturally, like peanut butter and tahini? Is that problematic as well?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's that same thing as I think you need to be a little bit careful about the calorie density and the overall fat content. But depending on where you're at with things, so I don't have such a um, concern about that because at least you're getting those other nutrients with it. So it just depends on where you're at. So for example, the participants in the broad study, we really tried to keep them very much low fat, whole food, plant based. And so those would have been things that we wouldn't have been encouraging them to have a lot of. And so it just depends on your own sort of parameters for that.
So, well, can you go into the broad study a little bit
Yeah.
as exactly what it was, how it was conducted, the population, and the results?
Yeah, so basically we had so I think we ended up with about 25 after people dropped out in each group. And it was just a group of people selected from the community. They had to have a chronic health condition, so usually type 2 diabetes, a history of ischemic heart disease. They might have had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and they had to have either been either overweight or obese as well. Obesity was able to be like a inclusion criteria by itself. And so, like I said, we recruited these participants from a single general practice in Gisborne, and then what we did is we spent 12 weeks with them basically having fun. So they got an opportunity to learn from trained chefs how to cook plant-based meals. So every session, they come for 2 sessions a week, Tuesday and Thursday nights. And they would, one half of them would get the talk with us first, and then the other half would be out cooking, and then they would swap around. And we did that for 12 weeks. And we did other fun things like quizzes and sessions that they got to have just you know, discussing their journey with each other, I think, as well, which were really valuable. We did a movie night with the showing Forks Over Knives for the first night, which everyone really enjoyed. We made some oil-free popcorn and things for that. And so, yeah, we just try to make it really fun and engaging. And so from that, obviously, um, the I suppose the end goal was, well, two things. We wanted to really demonstrate that it could be done in Gisborne because we had spoken to doctors at the hospital that were training us before, and we'd shown them, Dr. Ornish's studies and Dr. Esselstyn's research as well. And they said, well, that's all well and good, but these people aren't from Gisborne, New Zealand. And so we sort of said, well, we bet we can make this work just here, just as well here too. So that was one of the goals. And of course, the other goal was to get some kind of research publication out of it. And of course, the reason we called it broad was because there's just so many benefits that you can get from, this lifestyle change. And we knew that those benefits weren't all going to be, reflected in the results necessarily, because that's just what happens, especially when you've got a small group like we did. And so the one thing that they all had in common was that they all were either overweight or obese. And so we were able to show some really incredible changes in that. Like I said, over the 1 year period, they maintained sort of 11.5 kilograms worth of weight loss. But there were also, some fantastic results in terms of people being able to lower their medications, um, you know, people, getting back to the gym and sort of deciding that they would exercise after a little while, things like that. So we did see some, big changes in people's quality of life, basically.
And was there any long-term follow-up past the first year?
Yeah, so there was some ongoing follow-up of it. I think what ended up happening was that basically, so I left Gisborne at that stage, came down to Wellington, which is where I am now. Spent this time writing the course and everything, which took a lot of my time. And so the others up in Gisborne did take some measurements, and from what I've seen, the raw data, it looks really, really good too. And so, but I guess the problem is you get more and more dropouts after that time. And so I'm not sure whether there's going to be a publication forthcoming from that. But basically, and this is kind of what I was trying to get at with the talking about surroundings and the environment, right? And so you can imagine this is a small rural town in New Zealand. And what we were able to do during the time of the study and for a little bit after that as well is create an environment and a community that was really conducive to people continuing on with this. And I think, definitely a lot of them did, but also you can just imagine the kind of, I suppose, influences over time of the food environment that these people were surrounded by. Because Gisborne, little place, has like two supermarkets, doesn't have, a Whole Foods or anything like that where people can go and easily find these kinds of foods and things. So my suspicion is that, most people continue to do it and do it really well. But yeah, there certainly would have been some attrition and some dropout over that sort of 2 to 3 years afterwards where they were still collecting the data.
And given the importance of community,
Hmm.
was there any effort to maintain regular sessions in a community kind of setting to
Yeah.
maintain the relationships of a support group?
Yeah, this is one of my I guess, well, how do I put it? One of the things that I find most disappointing about the situation there was that we did do some of that, but it was tricky, right? Because on the one hand, so for me, I really felt like we knew this was going to work. We'd seen it work time and time again. We'd been to Dr. McDougall, we'd been to, um, True North, and we know this works already. The problem is if you're trying to convince people with an academic paper, you kind of want to show that at some point you're kind of withdrawing a little bit your intervention in order to say that people still manage to continue on with it. Because if you're looking at it like, say, like the way healthcare is funded in New Zealand, for example, they would say, well, we don't want to have to fund this for year after year after year necessarily. So we wanted to be able to show a little bit of that. So it was a bit of like friction, I suppose, between the idea of how do we maintain this awesome, community that's been created, and how much should they need to be doing that by themselves. And to be fair, they did do quite a bit. In fact, one of them started up for a while. I don't think it's there anymore, but they started a whole cafe that was whole food plant based. Um, and so there was a lot of, kind of exciting things that came out of it that they started themselves. But as far as us being able to facilitate that, which I think would have been really helpful for some people, um, we had to kind of temper that with, we need to make this look like something that's going to be a little bit self-sustaining. And I think nowadays, if I was able to do it again, I would have said from the outset, we are going to continue to, build this community and things. And we did do a second group and things. There may well be further publications coming out of Gisborne at some point from this, but yeah, that's kind of the way that it ended up. But great question. And I think that's so important for people is you need to connect with that community, and you need to continue engaging in order to without ending up just like this little island of good health amongst um, you know the ocean, I suppose, of the situation that we usually have of chronic
Sorry, I
disease.
don't know. I'm frozen. Give me 1 second here.
Oh yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Back.
I don't know which one. I don't know which
Yeah.
one. I think it might have been on my side, so I apologize for that.
Uh,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I just from my own experience, without a strong community, you have to kind of be a renegade, and you have to be
Yeah.
willing to be different than everybody else around you and take, sometimes it's in fun, sometimes it's not so in fun, where people kind of will say something about the way you're eating.
Yeah.
Having, being in a space when you're in a space where you're with other people eating plant-based for whatever
Mm.
reason, it's like, I don't know, being on a tropical island, if you will, which,
Yeah.
you're like, it's in
You can just talk
paradise.
about
But
other things rather than what you're eating, like,
well,
yeah, it's
exactly right. Or you could talk about what you're eating, but you're like, oh, what's the recipe? Yeah, so it's
yeah,
really, it does.
yeah, yeah, 100%.
Um, so going back to the oil question, and then and fats. So,
Yeah.
what about nuts and seeds? I'm not sure what you said about that.
Well, we sort of left nuts and seeds because I suppose I think they're actually in the yeah, they are in the course as well. But I only had so much time, and as you saw, I probably could have packed more in there. But I think it was already quite a large information download for most people, and so nuts and seeds, the same kind of thing as avocado and coconut. So use them as little condiments. Don't make them the center of your dish unless it's a special occasion. Obviously, if you're making we do have ways to make plant-based mac and cheese and so forth without cashews. But if it's someone's birthday or something like that, or whatever. And I think that's the thing, is it all depends on where you're coming from. As I think it's Dr. Ornish, one of his sayings is the ounce of prevention is better than the pound of cure. And so if you're not in a pound of cure kind of situation, then, of course, a little bit of these things every now and then. But I think the mistake that people make, and often where they go off track a little bit, is thinking that these are health foods that they should be including every day. Whereas the message that we were trying to get, I suppose, promote in the broad study as well, and also in the course, is that these things are sort of occasional, and if you learn to make things without them, and they're really tasty without them, then yeah, you can add some of those in, and they just make it even better. But if you learn to cook with those things, then it's much harder to make tasty meals and have your taste buds respond nicely. So does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the mac and cheese without the cashews.
Yeah,
What do
yeah.
you use for the sauce? What's the base of the
Um,
cheese?
Gosh, I think you can use like sweet potatoes, pumpkins, things like that. So beans even. So there's a recipe on our website, and it's to be honest with you, it's been a little while. So, but I think we used yeah, sweet potatoes and things like that too, and you use a lot of nutritional yeast if you do that as well. But you certainly can do it. It was fun. We started making recipes for the course, but we made. These were the days before AI and everything. So I think nowadays you could definitely do it a lot quicker with something like ChatGPT as a sidekick. But just me and Craig in the kitchen, a doctor and essentially an artist or a writer, that's going to take you a long time to make something really tasty, especially with the kind of restrictions we put on ourselves. So we came up with a couple of really great recipes, but yeah, we didn't continue making more and more recipes because yeah, it was just taking too long.
And that's under the so it's 2zestybananas.com and
Yeah.
21st Century Recipes, that one. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, they should be around somewhere. Yeah,
All
they
right.
won't be too
Mac and
far.
cheese, a classic goes plant-based. All right, perfect. I just
That's
want to
the
note
one.
that
Yeah, yeah,
for myself. I do use a lot of cashew sauces,
yeah,
and
yeah,
after this year's conference, I definitely want to, yeah, still include nuts and seeds, but definitely reduce some of that as well as the
yeah.
avocado. So, given the limited amount of nuts and seeds that we should be consuming, are there any specific nuts and seeds that if you have, that we should choose over others that give you the biggest bang for the buck if you're gonna have that limited
Well,
amount?
yeah. Well, again, I think going with what you like is always sensible. If you're treating these things like treats, but you know, as I said in the presentation, like using walnuts, chia seeds, and flax seeds all give you some omega-3. So I think that's a good place to go. And I think probably one of the issues, even with consuming too much of the high-fat foods, is that it does upset that omega-3 to omega-6 ratio because the higher fat foods tend to be very high in omega-6, and that seems to outcompete our ability to convert over the omega-3. So yeah, so I'd say that those would be really good ones to start with. But I mean, if you don't really like them, again, I'm not saying you must eat these things or that they're special health foods and things. So if you're just using, your nuts and seeds as a treat. The problem I usually see is they're suggested as snacks for people, and a healthy snack. So if someone's trying to lose weight, it's like, I'll have a handful of almonds or whatever. And it's like, well, eat a potato or two instead. And so that's more sort of our approach. And yeah,
Sound like
just too easy to overeat.
you sound like you're channeling McDougal with the eat a
Yeah.
potato. Yeah.
Well, I hope so.
Yes, yeah, he's wonderful and a big loss. So with the omega threes, um,
Mhm.
we hear different people talking about EPA converting to DHA being a
Yeah,
problem.
yeah, yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? And you mentioned just now that that it was a ratio issue. I know there's a big ratio issue, but I didn't realize it
Mm.
was with the conversion. So you're saying if you're getting the right balance of omega threes to omega sixes, which I believe is 1 to 1, would you expect conversion to go well? And if you're off balance,
Yeah.
automatic?
I mean, that's what seems, I mean, there's a lot of debate around this, and the honest truth is that we don't know the answer. We've talked a lot today about all of the brain boosting benefits of whole foods from plants. Those are all regardless of how much omega-3 you're getting, right? And so I think the thing that we have as a society is a real temptation to always look at this one thing that might fix things. And
Mhm.
that even I would say as well, that's something that also, even amongst the plant-based community and in plant-based doctors, I think that's an issue that we sort of need to come to terms with as well. Because if you think about it, if you're doing all these great things for your blood vessel health, if you're doing all these great things as far as, these other compounds, the antioxidants, keeping your brain really well hydrated all the time and keeping that blood flowing nicely, what is the effect of that additional, omega-3? And the answer is unknown, and we probably will never know. So what I tend to recommend is just, people that are at the extremes of life. So if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, maybe for younger children and, older ages, then perhaps you just take a little bit of EPA, DHA as an insurance policy. But yeah, I know that even saying that is going to be a little bit controversial. But certainly it does seem like, and it's very interesting that there's at least anecdotal reports of, if yeah, you do keep your overall fats quite low, then it seems that you actually do get better conversion. So just like the body adapts, for example, to us absorbing other nutrients, when it doesn't get a huge amount of them, it becomes more sensitive to absorbing what we do get. It should be the same thing with omega-3s, And so I think when we look at the conversion over, what we're looking at usually in those studies is an unwell population that is consuming large amounts of omega-6s and is consuming very small amounts of omega-3 in their diet, and also, many other factors that might affect that conversion. So I don't know that we can necessarily extrapolate. And this is always the problem, right? Because we want to be as science-based and as evidence-based as we possibly can be. But the reality is at times it's just not there, and that we have to admit that it's not there and that we don't know. And that leaves a lot of people, including myself, uncomfortable. And this is one of the reasons. Sorry, I'm
No,
talking for
no,
a little bit,
no,
but
no, please.
when I first found out about this, as I said, I read the China study and everything, then I read Dr. Esselstyn's book, and I was like, I want to do what Dr. Esselstyn does. And I was looking at his recipes in there, and I was like, oh, mango and tofu and all these things that weren't so easy to come by in New Zealand. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. It's just too hard. I need these exact recipes. I need this exact stuff. And then when I went to the chip conference that it was that I met him at in Rotorua, and him and Anne had been out to Pack and Save, which I don't know what an equivalent would be. I guess it's like a Safeway, or kind of a pretty lowbrow Walgreens maybe, supermarket in New Zealand. And they'd managed to find all these things, and they were like, yeah, you can have Wheat Bix, which is our common breakfast cereal here, and we found this kale, and you can have, I think it was Ryvita crackers or something they had. I was like, oh, I know those things. I can do that. So sort of the magic disappeared a little bit, and I think that's part of the issue, is that it can be really easy, especially for someone like myself, because I like to be very evidence based, but it can be paralyzing at the same time. And sometimes you just got to, I often say this to my patients, we've just got to do the best that we can with the numbers that we have and the data that we have at the moment, and know that we might make some mistakes, but most of the time, we're going to be heading in the right direction. And I think that's what it is with omega-3, to be fair.
So one thing that you just said that was very interesting, and I want to make sure I understood you correctly, is when
Mhm.
people are eating so it's very interesting because in affluent areas or affluent countries, people
Mhm.
tend to be eating too much, but also be malnourished, right? When you hear the word malnourished, you often think of people starving, but you have an obese country and we're malnourished. And you said something along the lines of when you're getting all of these nutrients in your body you
Yeah.
often have a
Mhm.
hard time pulling various nutrients from all the things that you're eating. And that the less that you eat, the better, the more sensitive your body is, or the better your body is to pull nutrients. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah, so if we're overdoing it on iron, for example, so you often get the argument, well, the iron from plants is less well absorbed. The difference is in fact that the iron that is comes from animal products, the body has no choice but to absorb. And so that's probably one of the reasons why we start seeing it potentially causing issues regarding inflammation and so forth and chronic disease for the body is so your body has no choice but to absorb that heme iron. Whereas if it's plant-based iron, then the body has receptors, and if we take too much iron or we get too much iron in the diet, then it's going to upregulate or downregulate accordingly. And that's because some of these nutrients, iron is a perfect example, are toxic in large amounts.
Why can't the body upregulate or downregulate its absorption of heme iron?
I don't know the answer to that question, I'll just be honest.
Okay. Okay,
But
but there
so
is a distinction. Okay,
I,
great.
I I presume it's just absorbed in a different way.
So, what are common misconceptions when people are starting a whole food plant-based diet?
Uh, Common misconceptions as far as
Just what people, one, I mean, a one I think would be
oh
like, eating lots of, avocados and nuts and all this type of stuff that you need to do that. That would be one, for
yeah,
example.
yeah. No, look, I think probably the most common one would be and that it's just all eating salads all the time. And that's the biggest problem that you end up having because then you don't feel good. And as we talked about in the energy section, which we sort of headed up the presentation with, the kind of the staples are your starches, which was what Dr. McDougall was all about. And so those are really the foods. And I think even in our well, I'm not sure whether we did it in the study, but in the traffic light system that I have on my website, I actually have a specific section for energy foods, just to remind people that they need to base things around, often things that unfortunately nowadays people think are really bad for us, which is your whole grains and your beans and legumes and your starchy vegetables. And so this is the problem is that we have people that are trying to actively avoid carbohydrates and foods that are good sources of those. And so then when they change onto something or they go vegan or they go plant-based, they take out, the meat and they're left with salads, which are really sort of nutrient dense, which is great, but they're very, low energy. And so then people say, oh gosh, I'm not getting enough protein. I feel really tired all the time. And I'm going to go back to, the animal products or whatever they were doing before. So that would probably
Okay.
be the biggest one.
Okay. And now, when people are avoiding, when you're referring to the people who are avoiding the starches and the carbohydrates,
Mm,
were you
mm.
referring to people who do keto?
Oh, not specifically, but I just mean as a society, it's always what I hear is so I'm a GP, so every day I'm at work. If someone comes in and I'll say, we're talking about their weight or whatever, and they'll say, oh yeah, yeah, I've cut back on my carbohydrates. And I'm just like, oh no, and so it's but it's hard because that's obviously for some reason that's the messaging that's out there. And that's unfortunately one of the things, which I've learned in time after doing all of this is that whatever the general, I guess it's the vibe, what's on social media, what's going on in society, the understanding of people is carbs are what makes us unwell and fat. And there's a lot of people pushing that. And so it's really difficult for me then to come in and say, oh, please eat more whole grains and please have this and that, because everyone that they know that is telling them that these things whatever their favorite influencer is on Instagram or TikTok or wherever is saying cut these things out. And so it's even though we've got the evidence behind us and we did this great study, it's not always about evidence, unfortunately. It's about, what the general sort of gist is, and the feeling that people still have, unfortunately, is avoid carbs.
And when someone is avoiding carbs, what do you expect to see in their health? And we're talking about complex
Deterioration,
carbs.
basically. I
Right?
mean, deterioration. I mean, if that's kind of like the baseline, which most people are doing in our society, when people say that to me, it's not that they've come in and I'm like, oh my gosh, why are you looking so healthy and doing so well with all your numbers? They'll be telling me that they've cut out carbs in order to try and make a change in their health, and it obviously isn't making any difference because we're having that conversation in the first place. So yeah, so I think that's kind of where things are at, unfortunately. So you do see, you see basically everything that we saw that was good in our study, you sort of flip that the opposite way when people go on something that's low carb and more animal product heavy.
So, even after going on a whole food plant-based diet, what are some of the common health challenges that you see people have afterwards, if any?
So if they're doing a whole food plant-based lifestyle like we did in the broad study, there's not much left. I'll be honest with you. It seems to work for just about everything. Like sometimes if people have autoimmune conditions or skin conditions, things like that, then there might be extra stuff. I'm not sure if you had Brooke Goldner on this year, but there's definitely people out there. Um, Clint Patterson, who's an Australian, who reversed his rheumatoid arthritis with a similar kind of plan. So sometimes you have to do things a little bit more intensively or be a little bit more granular about it if you've got some other chronic health condition that you already have. But for most people, most of the time, like I'm always saying to people, look, I've never seen this not work for anyone. And the best thing to do first is just do kind of what we're suggesting or what we did during the study. And if that's not good enough for you, then yeah, go and see one of those other people that I mentioned and see what else can be done. But generally speaking, it just sorts everything. And if you don't, if it's not 100%, then this is when things like, you might still need a medication. But if you are using a medication, you know that you actually might need it and that you can use as little, the smallest amount as possible. So I saw Dr. McDougall taking a lot of people off a lot of medication, but there were some that he would, leave on medication for whatever reason. To be fair to him though, he only had that sort of 10 days sort of window that he was able to make these big changes. So I think it really depends on how long you've been doing it for, and what's possible for you, because obviously some people are more able to do this than others, and that can be dependent on their lifestyle, their family, might even be their financial means, their time pressures, and that's something that I've learned as well is that not everyone can do all of this 100% of the time. But what I'd like to see is everyone doing as much of it as possible, and then I use as little medication as possible for them.
So, you worked at True North or studied at True North for a period of time. By the
Yeah.
way, before I even get into that, just a quick scheduling note. So Dr. Goldner will be talking tomorrow, Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So we'll get to hear from
Perfect.
her then. So that's great. So True North, and the role of fasting. So,
Mm,
a lot of people still, even after going whole food plant-based, do have some lingering things. Um,
yeah.
or maybe they're not going whole food plant-based and they want to, clear out their system and recover.
Mm.
We've had Dr. Goldhammer talk a couple of
Have
times
you?
already. Oh yeah,
Oh, cool.
yeah, I'm planning going out there. I just need to figure out when I'm gonna have the time to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
do a
Mm,
long fast like that. It's like a year's worth of vacation, to go out and not
Oh,
eat
yeah.
somewhere. So, What have you, or do you use fasting at all in your in any of your treatments or prescriptions? And what have you found in general, whether you have personally or not used that
Mm,
for
mm. So I'm very open to it, but even when I was, the funny thing is it's become so mainstream, and Dr. Goldhammer's had a huge amount to do with that, as has Dr. Clapper, which is wonderful. But when I was over at True North, we come back from our elective and we have to write something for the medical school about what we did. And at that point, I didn't feel confident writing that we were fasting people and things there, because that's how kind of fringe it was seen at that time. And so while I'm really supportive of fasting, and I think that definitely some people do see that as a really good way of resetting and maybe getting some benefits that you might not get just from eating alone, it's kind of been something that I've stayed away from in New Zealand, at least initially, because even what I was saying initially was just telling people to eat healthy food is probably one of the things that Dr. Goldhammer and Dr. Clapper would concur with, is and definitely Dr. McDougall is radical enough, so basically, I think that there's definitely some benefits from it. I'm good friends with Dr. Nathan Gershfeld, who was supervising me when I was at True North as well, or who was our um, volunteer supervisor, if you like, and also Dr. Renee Thomas, who has been doing some work on, I think it's Fasting Escape is his program. And so I have, yeah, real immense respect for everyone who's working in that space, and I think that there's definitely some promise there, but it's not. I'm not sort of personally fasting people, if that makes sense.
Well, just another scheduling note, if you're interested in seeing some stuff on fasting, right after this conversation, right after we finish at 7 o'clock in about 17 minutes, we're gonna have a panel with Dr. Goldhammer and Dr. Talis Barker. And they'll be talking on water fasting, unlocking the life-challenging benefits of optimal health. And so if you want to like a refresher, or maybe ask a question or something, they'll be available right after this. So now, so when you talked about oil replacements, and I try to minimize oil, but and like with onions and all that kind of stuff. Um, what do you suggest? And I'm just gonna throw this out there. So an oil replacement, for like a recipe that's just tofu with some like some tamari oil and tapioca starch. What would you, in that kind of case, replace the oil with? Not that you're a
Hmm.
recipe, expert, but
No, I'm not. Um, so basically, you're using the oil to help sort of infuse the flavors into the tofu.
yeah, I guess, and to crisp it up a little bit.
Oh, right, right. I mean, this is one of the things that I don't know, because again, I'm not claiming to be a chef here, but certainly my air fryer has been an amazing purchase, and so. I would be tempted to see if there's some way that you can do it that way, to just crisp the tofu up a little bit, or even just, if you still need the oil, you're probably going to need a lot less, right? So I'll be looking to see whether you could use that. Again, um, shout out to some of the AI things that are out there now. So recipes and adjustments and everything, because I'm always like, oh, like I said, I get this. It's called a wonky box in New Zealand, and this isn't a paid endorsement or anything, but it basically, wonky means sort of, I guess misshapen or something like that, not quite the
Mm.
right shape. And so it comes with all these fruits and vegetables that weren't good enough for the supermarket, which would
Okay,
otherwise
yeah.
go to waste. And so that turns up every week, and I never know what's going to be in there. I think last week it was like Brussels sprouts. I'm like, oh, how do I do Brussels sprouts? I don't know off the top of my head. So I just put that into, my AI. So I use ChatGPT, and I'll just say, how long do I need to do it in the air fryer for? It's going to give you the exact thing. And probably even for that question, you could say, look, I really want to crisp up the tofu. I've got this and this and this. Um, how can I do it? And it will say, there's no way of doing it. What you heard from Dr. Wilson on The Real Truth About Health Summit is not true. um, but you could do it this way, or you must use a little bit of oil, or there's other ways of doing it. So it's really good for that kind of thing. So that would be my recommendation, as far as fixing that recipe.
Great. Well, speaking of resources, and given
Mm,
the importance of communities, communities and support groups, are
mhm.
there any good resources online that you could recommend for people to either have an online community or to find communities offline?
Well, I mean, it would depend sort of in the area that you're at. I know that there's plant pure communities, and so those I think are probably more prominent in the States. It depends on where the person is. So I would just look into, social media. I think on Facebook, for example, in New Zealand and Australia, there's a whole food plant-based Aussies group that's run by some friends of mine, Malcolm and Jenny. And so there's groups like that you can look for on Facebook. That's kind of what we said during the course presentation was have a look for anything that's whole food plant-based or WFPB, and you should start to find something. I think pretty sure there's some big communities online around Dr. McDougall's starch solution and so forth. And so you should be able to find some things there. I know that Rip Esselstyn used to have something going with his sort of what was it, plant powered or something like that, community and things. So that you can have a look there. I think there's definitely a lot of resources, and especially in the States. Um, in New Zealand and Australia, we've obviously got everything that we do through Doctors for Nutrition. So doctorsfornutrition.org is the website. You can have a look at that, even if you're not from here. And you could certainly sign up for webinars and so forth that we have. And that's an opportunity to get together with everyone. I think these kinds of conferences like you've got on at the moment are really good as well, because it, doesn't just provide people with information, but also, may provide an additional space for people to connect as well. I've just started something. I think we've got about 5 people in it at the moment, so you can be one of the originals if you want, which is on Discord. And so that's just sort of like if you end up downloading the 21st Century Food course or just even the free first week, the free first week's a little bit less important now that you can get the entire course for pay what you like, but it's still there, and you'll get an invite to that Discord server, and you can just, basically we're just going to have casual chats in there. So, that's what I've started like literally in the last couple of days. So shout out for that too.
So just some clear 25th century
21st,
food court.
21st.
20, well, I really hopped into the future there. 21st
Yeah, I know.
century food court.
Great.
Yes,
Hopefully we're
yeah,
still around in the 25th
yeah.
century. Probably
Yes,
will be
that's
ours or
the power
something.
of a whole food plant-based diet. We're very optimistic
Yeah.
here. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you go to your website, and then 21st Century Food Course, and then you download that, and then you'll have the opportunity to join the Discord. Is that Discord?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, great.
Or just email me. I mean, I'm not
Sorry?
keeping that. Or I said, or just email me. Like it'll be on the website at some stage. It's just I had a lot of stuff to get ready for this talk and everything. So I'm just
Yeah,
sort of
no
putting
worries.
stuff aside.
No worries. So what do you see as a clinician of people who are on keto diets? What are the and what does the research show of like the long-term consequences? Because it's almost like it's almost like an experiment that's never been done in history of
Yeah.
people being able to eat so much, protein and fat. And in nature, we just wouldn't be able to do that. So what are you seeing in your practice and in the research?
Um, Look, again, it's just the same as what the studies show. Short term, great, and even short term. Can you make an argument for it? I mean, some people will and say, well, if they're not going to do anything else, it's better for them to drop the weight and then they go back to doing what they were doing, but at least they're, 5 to 10 kgs lighter, whatever. It's hard to say because we don't know what kind of damage that insult from that short period of time that they were eating keto is going to do to their, to their vascular health, for example, would be something I'd be particularly concerned about. I just saw a study, every morning I get new studies delivered to my inbox. And this morning I saw one looking at low carbohydrate diets increasing people's uric acid. And people probably know that uric acid is, a key risk factor for gout. And so the research is just going to keep coming out like, and this is the thing that frustrates me with research, right? Is that we're just going to keep learning the same things again and again. And at some point we need to try and put it into practice a little bit. And I think the way of doing that is not, not jumping on. I think a lot of people do a keto diet because they don't know that a whole food plant-based diet exists, or their doctor doesn't know that a whole food plant-based diet exists. So one of my best, a good friend of mine here, who's a big advocate for ketogenic diets, and I think if someone had got to him with whole food plant-based first, he might have been advocating for that instead, if you know what I mean. So it's sometimes it's just a matter of us actually getting this message out there. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to make the food course. It's been 10 years since we wrote it, about 10 years since we did the broad study as well. And I'm like, let's just get this information out there. So please share it with your friends and family or whoever wants it. And anything you can. That's something that everyone that's on this can do is try and amplify the message outside of your usual, social media channels, because we know how it works with its algorithms and everything, where it keeps us all locked in. And that's probably one of the reasons why we're seeing these emergence of ketogenic and carnivore and so forth without any evidence. But it's because people just like in our broad study, if we'd gone to them with a ketogenic diet, I'm sure they would have done it, many of them, just because they were looking for anything that would help them. And that's the danger of the ketogenic diet. And so just as Dr. McDougall would have said, just like smoking would, it's going to help you lose some weight. But does that mean that, that's, is that kind of the standard that we should be measuring these interventions by? We know from the research that eating more whole plant-based foods is really important for your longevity. There's no study out there. Someone please show me the study that shows that in the long term, eating more fruits and vegetables and whole grains, beans and legumes is going to negatively impact your health. In fact, the anecdote that we have from, the people that Dr. Esselstyn studied, from the blue zones with Dan Buettner, is just showing that the more plants you eat, the longer and healthier you live. So we've got what we need to be able to make huge gains in human health, and we've had that for a long time. Dr. McDougall spent his whole career talking about this. Dr. Clapper, Dr. Goldhammer, all of these, Dr. Esselstyn, I could name off a bunch, and you saw them all in that list, and there's been more since that have come out and saying exactly the same thing. So we have what we need to be able to make huge changes in people's health. It's about our messaging, getting the message out there, and yeah, I guess convincing a few people. But the way that we convince them is not by necessarily arguing with them or trying to beat them down with research. It's about showing them what's possible, and that's really what we were trying to do with Broad.
I think one of the challenges for the whole food plant-based diet with in relation to the keto diet and what makes the keto diet a little bit more accessible, at least in the beginning,
Mm,
is
mm.
people know how to make a bacon cheeseburger,
Oh
right?
yeah,
But
100%.
they don't know how to make
No,
mac and cheese, like
totally is.
a
Not as we.
yeah, plant-based, right, exactly, plant-based mac and cheese,
Mhm.
or foods that they're familiar with, and they just don't
Mm.
even like it's like learning um, a whole new way of living as
New
opposed to
language.
keto diet, which kind of is just doubling down on what you've been doing, just getting rid of some of the bad habits, but reinforcing others.
You're absolutely right. And which one do you reckon's quicker? You know? So, just again, taking it back to our recipes that took us so long to make and so long to, and so I think time is really important for people, and we're all, I'm really privileged because I can work 3 days a week and spend the rest of the time on things that I love, like doing these kinds of presentations and, starting new charities and things. But most people don't have that luxury, and I know you just mentioned before for yourself, I love the States, but they need to get better like vacation, allowances. Um, and it's, if anything, it's moving in the opposite direction. There's a guy over here actually who's campaigning for a 4-day work week. And I honestly think, as much as there's so many things that we could do for people's health, but that, getting a 4-day work week, which they've actually found people more productive in anyway, at least as productive as they were, on 5 days, because a lot of people just use that extra time just to check their emails. And whereas if they know they've got a 4 days to get it done, they actually get it done. And then you've got that time for cooking and for doing, catching up with your community and doing some outdoor activities and sports and connecting. And so that's one of the biggest things that could be done. But the problem is people are time poor. So someone says on TikTok and shows how they lost, 10 kilograms or, 20 pounds or whatever it is by eating more bacon cheeseburgers. which they can flip on the grill. They know how to do it. You're absolutely right. It's familiar, it's easy, it's accessible. Of course, they're going to do that. Someone's telling them chopping vegetables and sauteing and vegetable broth. And yeah, as tasty as it is, it's not what they're familiar with. 100% agree with you there.
So you talked about eating a plant-based diet having an
Mm.
impact on our ability to save the world. And I
Mm.
don't expect you to have this number, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What percentage of people would need to adopt a plant-based diet before we would see positive effects on our environment?
Oh, I think it's small amounts. I don't know the number off the top of my head. Like I'm sure there's people that have modeled that. I forget who the book was that we used as a major. I think it was it Oppenlander, Richard Oppenlander, someone like that. Don't quote me on that for sure. But so there's so many people that are so much more engaged with this than I am. George Monbiot, people like that. Even David Attenborough nowadays is saying that people should be eating more whole plant-based, foods basically for planetary health. I don't think we need a huge amount of us. And just like I said in that bit about the 1%, so we're the ones who can do it. There's whole areas of the world, as I said, who mostly are plant-based already, but just because you know, that's what they have in their food environment and traditionally. But we if one of the things that we're doing that's pushing that meat and dairy demand is that we're showing it on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and everything, and we're eating these things, and so the rest of the world wants to be like what they see on what they see the West is doing, because they see that as progressive, they see that as developed. But if we in the West were able to say, well, actually, we're going to go back to more plants, which I think we were kind of heading in that direction for a little while, and then sort of COVID happened, and then it became all about, I don't know, I think money all of a sudden became the important thing, and the economy and so forth. And everyone around the world, I went on a trip to Europe last year and everyone there was complaining about the economy. Then I come back to New Zealand, everyone's complaining about the economy. In the US, I know everyone's complaining about the economy. And it's like, well, that's important, but we need a world to live in. Um, and so that this would be one of the great ways is to get everyone eating more whole foods from plants. And if we do that and we model that to the rest of the world, I really think, some of those stats that, we were talking about during the presentation, it's only, one meal a week, or the whole world, swaps out their beef. A lot of places don't eat. There's not a whole lot of beef being eaten in India, for example. Um, so, we reduce that by 20%, and it's the same as changing the entire world over to electric cars, which is something there's no way we're going to be able to do that anyway with the resources we have.
So we have a minute or so left.
Oh, nice.
So I want to ask you. So it's a in these types of talks, where especially when you talk about the planet's health, it can
Mm,
get a little
mm.
overwhelming, and it's a fine line between inspiring someone and making them feel overwhelmed and hopeless.
No, I know.
How do you ensure that when you're talking about this type of stuff, you leave people inspired to make changes instead of inspired to throw up their hands? And you have about a minute or so
Oh, look, I think we honestly just emphasize how important what you're able to do is, and yeah, Jonathan Safran Foer wrote a nice book called "We Are the Weather," which I think, there's a lot of talk at the moment about, it's all systems, which is true, but I think we need to keep in mind that there's a lot that we can do ourselves, and it's not just one thing or the other. So we have a lot of power, and that's what people are showing with their health by being part of this conference. You have some agency, and so I think just reminding people of that, and that's why I try to put that practical tips in at the end.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was a full packed
Oh
presentation,
no, yeah.
and I really enjoyed
Okay.
the Q&A with you. So thank you.
Thanks.
If we could unmute the audience, please, so they can show their appreciation.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.